In July 2008, China was bustling with final preparations to welcome the Beijing Olympic Games. But during this sensitive time, a Canadian female model was brutally murdered in an apartment building in Shanghai under horrific circumstances. At this critical moment, her death immediately captured worldwide attention. This female model had only been in China for just over 10 days and had no romantic conflicts or personal grudges. So who killed her, and why with such cruelty? At 6 a.m. on Monday, July 6th, the city began to bustle with honking cars and crowds rushing to subway stations, a typical Monday morning start in Shanghai like any other day. Among the busy crowd, a tall blonde girl walked on the sidewalk, her face still showing traces of sleepiness after staying up late the night before. Despite her simple dress, her striking Western features still drew curious glances from passers-by. Charlotte Wood, this Canadian model, was returning to her rented home after a night of watching movies at a friend's house. She was heading toward the Jinsen building at 488 Jiaohua Road, Changning District. Hidden in a quiet, small alley, the building was surrounded by black iron fences that had rusted over time. Unlike other areas bustling with construction noise preparing for the Olympics, this place was quite peaceful in the heart of the bustling city. Charlotte and her roommate Diana Gabriel O'Brien rented apartment 602 together. Although the building had 2 elevators, being a model, Charlotte always chose to walk up the stairs, her daily exercise routine. Only this time, this seemingly harmless decision would push her into a horrifying scene. The light in the hallway was dim, creating strange shadows. When Charlotte reached about halfway between the 4th and 5th floors, an unusual figure ahead made her slow down. Looking more carefully, she felt chilled. In front of her was a long-haired woman lying face down, head down, completely motionless. Dried brown-red blood was scattered all over her body, on the floor, even on the walls, a clear scene of death. Horrified beyond control, Charlotte spun around and ran downstairs, her legs trembling with each step. She rushed straight to the security office, trying to communicate through gestures and broken English with the middle-aged security guard about someone being dead upstairs. In her panic, she even said it was a Chinese woman, although she hadn't actually seen clearly. But the language barrier left the security guard completely unable to understand what she was trying to convey. Desperate, Charlotte decided to take the elevator to the 6th floor apartment to find Diana to figure out what to do together. But as soon as the elevator doors opened, she was completely stunned. In front of her was a pool of congealed blood on the gray cement floor of the hallway. Those dark red blood traces weren't there by accident. They originated right from their apartment door, flowing in a long stream to the staircase and continuing down to the 5th floor. This shock was like a horrifying light illuminating Charlotte's mind. The woman lying dead downstairs was no one else. Very likely Diana, her roommate. The entire cruel truth suddenly appeared in her head. As if haunted, Charlotte frantically kept pressing the elevator close button, rushing down to the 1st floor in a state of extreme panic. With trembling hands, she called her Chinese friend, her voice choking. "Someone is dead in the staircase. I think it's Diana." When police arrived and conducted the examination, what Charlotte feared most had become reality. The victim was indeed Diana Gabriel O'Brien, her 22-year-old roommate who had been stabbed 22 times and died in the cold staircase of the apartment building. What was even more heartbreaking, this was only the 12th day since Diana had set foot in Shanghai with so much hope for the future. Before coming to Shanghai, Diana could be said to know nothing about this country or the work she was about to do here. She was like being deceived into coming to China. Like Charlotte, she also came from BC Province, Canada. Diana was born in Winnipeg, then moved to the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia Province when she was 4 years old. After her parents divorced, she and her 2 sisters followed their mother to settle in the Gulf Islands, a peaceful coastal area near Vancouver. With a height of 5 feet 9 inches, a well-proportioned figure, and natural pure beauty, Diana possessed a special attraction. In 2007, determined to pursue her dreams, she applied to Cottage Management, CM, the only model management company in Victoria, and was immediately accepted. Her first opportunity didn't keep her waiting long. A 3-month fashion photography contract in Milan. The experience of working in the heart of Europe's fashion capital not only broadened her horizons but also ignited her desire to become a professional model. However, after returning to Canada, Diana didn't receive any additional contracts. In early 2008, a new opportunity arose when CM introduced her to work in Shanghai with Jiahe Company. According to the advertisement, this was a reputable brokerage firm with Taiwanese investment capital that had established cooperative relationships with top fashion magazines like Vogue, Elle, and Harper's Bazaar. What made Diana even more reassured was the assertion that Charlotte, another model from the company, was having a successful career there and had even appeared on the cover of Vogue. Hearing this, Diana felt less worried. Although she had never been to China and didn't know the language, she believed that after China joined the WTO in 2001, blonde, blue-eyed models were highly favored. However, the Canadian side didn't know that managing the modeling brokerage industry in China had many risks: overworking, having pay cut, or being forced into sensitive work. In June 2008, Diana signed a 3-month work contract with a quite disadvantageous income-sharing mechanism. 10% went to CM Company, 30% to Jiahe, and 10% tax to the Chinese government. Since the modeling profession wasn't yet recognized in the work visa category, she was forced to get a 30-day tourist visa and trust Jiahe's promise about extending it later. On June 24, 2008, Diana set foot in Shanghai and moved into the company dormitory on Jiaohua Road with Charlotte. The 3-bedroom apartment was spacious but severely deteriorated, with a fee of 360 yuan per person per month, a considerable expense for the quality received. Despite circumstances not being as expected, the two young women far from home quickly bonded and supported each other. However, work reality quickly shattered all of Diana's illusions. Her first job on Wednesday wasn't the magazine photo shoot she expected, but promoting whiskey at a nightclub. The following days were even worse. She had to dance in bars, attend restaurant opening ceremonies, appear at commercial events, all under the scrutinizing and even insulting gazes of audiences. Realizing she had been completely deceived, Diana called Canada to complain to her boyfriend and close friends, expressing her desire to return immediately. However, the extremely heavy contract violation penalty clauses made her consider carefully. Finally, she decided to use the visa limit as a legitimate reason to escape this situation. On July 3rd, just 9 days after setting foot in Shanghai, Diana secretly contacted the airline to change her ticket to return home on July 24th, exactly when her visa expired and 2 months earlier than the contract deadline. Only family and close friends knew about this decision. No one could have imagined that just 3 days later, a terrible tragedy would befall her. Summer 2008 was a particularly important time for China, as the entire country was concentrating all resources on 2 major events: the upcoming Beijing Olympics 2008 and preparations for Shanghai Expo 2010. In this context, while the whole world was focusing attention on China, the case of a young Canadian model brutally murdered with over 20 stab wounds in the heart of Shanghai port became the center of international media attention. Pressure from domestic and international public opinion poured onto Shanghai authorities. Recognizing the importance and sensitivity of the case, Shanghai police immediately established a special task force with the official name Shanghai Jinsen Building Murder Case, July 7th. The task force's top priority was to accurately reconstruct every detail of Diana's final hours. According to the recovered timeline, Sunday afternoon Diana completed work in Kunming and flew back to Shanghai, landing around 7 p.m. Instead of resting after the flight, she went straight home, then joined Charlotte and another model friend for dinner at a Middle Eastern restaurant near the apartment. After finishing the meal, Charlotte suggested going to a friend's house to watch movies, but Diana declined because she felt too tired after the long day and decided to go home and rest alone. After 10 p.m., security cameras recorded Diana leaving the apartment building and returning at 10:50. From food found in the refrigerator, police deduced she had gone to a nearby supermarket to buy necessities. At 11:30, some neighbors heard panicked screaming coming from the hallway, lasting 1 to 2 minutes before complete silence. However, these people thought it was just couples arguing, so no one went to check. This was very likely the moment Diana faced the killer. The scene inside the apartment witnessed a desperate struggle. The inside door handle was stained dark red with blood. The floor near the entrance was covered with small blood drops mixed with blood spatters. Bloody footprints scattered on the living room tile floor told the story of a fierce struggle, while isolated blood spots on the kitchen floor showed the brutality had spread throughout the apartment. In Diana's bedroom, the bedding had clear blood spatters, while belongings were overturned as if after a brutal search. The white wallet on the bed had been torn open, with all cash inside completely missing. Diana's phone was found under the bed, and blood traces that had been wiped on the wardrobe and travel bag showed the killer had tried to erase evidence after completing the cruel act. According to blood traces, she wasn't killed in the staircase from the beginning. The attack started in the living room, then Diana tried to run into the bedroom. She desperately tried to block the perpetrator outside the bedroom door, but this effort failed miserably. Inside the bedroom, Diana continued to be brutally attacked, with blood spatters on bedding being clear evidence. In the final phase of the struggle, she tried to escape from the room and run toward the staircase seeking help, but the killer caught up and ended her life right there. Notably, the perpetrator had entered through the main door rather than climbing in from the balcony or windows, showing calculated behavior. However, the door lock was completely intact with no signs of being broken, creating a difficult puzzle. Police quickly investigated Diana's social network and ruled out the possibility of acquaintances committing the crime. With only 12 days living in Shanghai, she had virtually no local relationships. Her life was also extremely simple, with most time spent working in other provinces. Charlotte also had solid alibi evidence for the night of the murder. However, the information she provided clarified an important detail. Diana, coming from a small island where no one locked doors and people all trusted each other, had brought this carefree habit to Shanghai. She often forgot to close the door completely after coming home, leaving just a small gap. Charlotte had reminded her many times and had to close the door herself, but Diana never seemed to change this habit, a small detail that ultimately became the cause of the tragedy. Although there was a security office downstairs, the 24-hour duty sign was like a fake sign, with usually no security inside. Police gradually realized that on the night of the murder, the door to room 602 was very likely unlocked from the beginning, allowing the perpetrator to enter directly without any obstacles. The question arose, who was this mysterious killer? In a huge city like Shanghai with millions of residents, tracking down a completely unknown random killer was extremely difficult. However, fate smiled on the investigation. The Jinsen building had only one entrance and exit, and fortunately, this area was covered by surveillance cameras. When reviewing the recordings, police discovered a suspicious character. Around 11:03 p.m. on July 6th, a young man dressed entirely in black jacket, black pants, only white shoes as an accent, entered the building. About 40 minutes later, this person hurriedly left with a panicked expression, his right shoulder jacket showing signs of being torn and suspicious stains on his clothes. What was unusual was that when leaving, he didn't carry any belongings. Recognizing the importance of this clue, police immediately expanded surveillance scope and searched more broadly. This effort brought a shocking discovery. At 3:57 a.m., many hours after the crime, that same young man appeared again at the bottom of the apartment building. This time, he came by bicycle and had extremely suspicious behavior, cycling around the building as if observing and probing the surrounding situation. At 4:06, he once again entered the building and stayed for about 30 minutes. But when leaving this time, he was carrying a suitcase. When police showed Charlotte images from the camera, she only needed one look to recognize immediately. The suitcase the stranger was carrying was Diana's. This evidence confirmed that the mysterious man in the recording was definitely directly connected to Diana's tragic death. Meanwhile, the autopsy report revealed heartbreaking details about Diana's final minutes. On that fateful night, she wore simple clothing, a t-shirt and patterned short skirt, and fortunately, there were no signs of sexual assault. However, her body endured a savage attack with a total of 22 stab wounds. Most were shallow wounds on the skin surface, possibly caused during Diana's desperate resistance to protect her life. But among them were some extremely dangerous knife wounds, stabbing deep into vital parts like the chest, liver, and heart. The weapon used was a sharp, single-edged object about 0.8 inches wide and at least 3.1 inches long. After being repeatedly attacked, Diana didn't die immediately. With strong will to live, she tried to crawl along the staircase seeking help, but her strength was only enough to crawl 2 or 3 steps before exhaustion. Finally, she died from excessive blood loss, with time of death estimated between 11 p.m. and dawn. What puzzled investigators was the motive for the crime. This wasn't a crime of passion or personal hatred, but if it was just ordinary robbery, why did the perpetrator act so brutally? Just when the investigation was at a standstill, local police reported to the task force about a strange call they had received on the night of the murder. At exactly 11:55 p.m., just about 25 minutes after Diana was attacked, the 110 emergency line received an anonymous call from a public phone booth at the intersection of Dingxi Road. The caller was a male with a local Anhui accent, saying hurriedly that he heard a foreigner calling for help near Jiaohua Road area, requesting police to come check. Immediately after speaking, this person hung up abruptly. Although patrol police didn't take it lightly and immediately dispatched cars to the area near Jinsen Building to check, the search yielded no results. They visited many residential areas around and asked security guards, all of whom confirmed they hadn't heard any unusual sounds. Therefore, this police report was recorded as a malicious prank and set aside. However, under the light of new evidence, this mysterious phone call might have completely different significance. Very likely the perpetrator himself had made the call. After committing the crime, perhaps part of his conscience had awakened, urging him to want police to come help the victim. But at the same time, fear of being discovered made him dare not provide a specific address, turning the rescue into a futile effort. Although the perpetrator tried to hide his identity, he had revealed important clues. Being able to accurately report Jiaohua road name showed familiarity with the area. Moreover, coming to the scene twice by walking or cycling proved he lived or worked not far from Jinsen Building. These were important hints helping narrow the search scope and direct the investigation toward focusing on local people with Anhui accents in the surrounding area. Based on this line of reasoning, police deployed a systematic sweep along Jiaohua Road, focusing mainly on migrant workers from other provinces, especially those with the characteristic Anhui accent. This persistent effort finally brought an important breakthrough at Hua Qiling Tea House. This tea house was just steps away from Jinsen Building, and notably, Diana had been a regular customer there. When police brought images from surveillance cameras for the owner to see, he had an immediate reaction. "Oh, this person looks very familiar. Seems like he really worked at our tea house as a server. However, the video quality isn't very clear, so I can't be 100% certain." However, the information the owner provided created an amazing coincidence. The employee he mentioned was named Chen Zifeng, originally from Anhui, and had only recently come to Shanghai for work. According to the account, before coming to the tea house, he had worked at a children's clothing factory in Huzhou. At the tea house, due to his poor work attitude and frequent disregard for management instructions, Chen Zifeng was quickly fired. Fortunately, due to hiring procedures, he had left photocopies of identification documents with the address clearly stating Langxi Anhui. This important evidence gave the task force a specific clue to pursue. They immediately contacted Langxi County Public Security, hoping to gather more detailed information about the mysterious character Chen Zifeng and verify his true identity. But local public security said they couldn't find this person, proving this identification document was fake. This situation wasn't unfamiliar in the social context of that time, when many migrant workers often used fake documents to overcome age barriers or other legal issues. This meant Chen Zifeng might not be his real name, or this person wasn't from Langxi County as declared. The clue seemed to have broken off here. However, luck smiled on the investigation when the police team sent to Huzhou brought back good news. A local police officer, when shown the photo on the fake documents, was able to identify the suspect and confirm that this person had indeed worked at one of the children's clothing factories in the area. The final breakthrough came when 4 fellow workers still working at that factory recognized the suspect. His real name was Chen Jun, actually from Shizi Town, Langxi County, Anhui Province. Coming from a poor farming family, Chen Jun was a child left behind in his hometown when his parents went to work far away. At 15, he had to drop out of school and follow the path of migrant labor. When the murder occurred, he was only 18 years old, but had already experienced many temporary jobs in different places, none lasting long. In May 2008, with vague hopes for a better future, Chen Jun came alone to Shanghai. Using fake documents, he found work serving at the tea house with a salary of 1,000 yuan per month, about $150. The monotonous life and financial pressure drove him to seek illusory escapes. Chen Jun began spending hours in internet cafes, immersed in the gaming world. The habit of excessive gaming seriously affected Chen Jun's work performance. With his mind always dreamy and unfocused, he gradually became a burden in the tea house owner's eyes. Finally, dismissal was inevitable. However, instead of seeking new opportunities or returning home, Chen Jun chose to continue avoiding reality by staying in the internet cafe on the second floor of the old tea house. In that dark and stuffy room, he spent his last money on virtual games, as if slowly self-destructing. According to a China news report on November 11, 2008, after determining the suspect's true identity, the task force immediately moved to Chen Jun's hometown in Langxi County to make the arrest. The manhunt ended quickly when they found him hiding in an internet cafe on the ground floor of a small hotel, the arrest time being exactly 4 days after the murder. When arrested, Chen Jun acted as if he had mentally prepared for this moment. He seemed to completely understand why police appeared and had no resistance whatsoever. He quickly confessed the entire process of killing Diana in detail. In his confession, Chen Jun admitted that after being fired, he had intended to return home. However, the brutal reality was that he was completely broke, not even having enough money to buy a bus ticket home. In this desperate situation, criminal thoughts began to emerge. In the simple mind of a rural youth, Shanghai was full of wealthy people, and stealing or robbing a little money to have enough means to go home didn't seem like a big deal. He convinced himself that for wealthy people, a few hundred yuan meant nothing, and they might not even report to police because the amount was too small. In fact, Chen Jun had no plan to target any specific objective. He had a simple plan: go floor by floor, apartment by apartment to probe and find the most favorable opportunity to strike. He chose Jinsen Building because it was near where he used to work, so he was familiar with the area and surrounding routes. When arriving at the building, Chen Jun discovered the main door wide open and the security office completely empty. Infiltration became unexpectedly easy. He began his survey journey by going floor by floor, observing and searching for apartments that could be easily broken into. Reaching the 6th floor, luck seemed to smile on him when he discovered the door to room 602 was only slightly ajar. Pushing the door gently and stepping inside, Chen Jun's eyes were immediately attracted by the white Apple laptop placed on the living room sofa, thinking it had high value and preparing to take it. However, Diana suddenly appeared from the bedroom after hearing strange sounds. In the first moment, Chen Jun wasn't completely panicked yet. Diana, with natural reflexes, used English to inquire about the stranger's intentions in her home, but the language barrier turned this encounter into a disaster. Chen Jun completely didn't understand what Diana was saying, only feeling he had been discovered, and the situation was becoming dangerous. In the instinctive reaction of a criminal caught red-handed, he quickly drew a knife and pointed it at Diana, demanding she give him money. Only then did Diana truly realize she was facing a dangerous robber. She began screaming in panic, a natural reaction that made Chen Jun even more frightened. In a state of losing control, he lunged at Diana and stabbed her once in the stomach. Diana, with strong survival instincts, fought back fiercely. She ran into the bedroom hoping to close the door and stop the attacker. But this effort failed, forcing her to run out of the apartment screaming for help, hoping someone would hear and help. The moment Diana ran out of the apartment screaming for help threw Chen Jun into extreme panic. In an uncontrolled state, he hurriedly chased Diana from the 6th floor to the 5th floor, and in his frenzy, repeatedly attacked her with the knife until Diana completely collapsed with no movement whatsoever. Even then, Chen Jun wasn't sure if Diana was still alive or dead, only knowing that in extreme terror, he fled the scene hastily. After escaping the residential area, Chen Jun was torn by contradictory fears he couldn't clearly express. Perhaps he was afraid Diana was still alive and would identify him later, or perhaps he was afraid that if she was really dead, from now on he would carry the crime of murder on his shoulders. In this complex and contradictory mood, a strange decision emerged. He called 110 to report to police, saying he heard a foreigner calling for help near Jinsen Building. However, due to fear of being discovered, he didn't provide a specific address, making the police report useless. After reporting to police, Chen Jun went to a nearby internet cafe to hide. However, a few hours later, curiosity and worry drove him to return to Jinsen Building by bicycle. First, he cycled around the building many times to observe and probe whether police had appeared in response to the previous anonymous report. When discovering everything was still quiet as usual, with no signs of law enforcement, he decided to return to room 602. This time, with a completely different mentality, Chen Jun systematically committed theft. He searched Diana's wallet, even tearing the inner lining to find cash. Not stopping there, he collected all valuable items his eyes could see: Charlotte's laptop and camera, Diana's phone and camera, and some other jewelry. All these spoils were carefully stuffed into the travel suitcase, preparing for the final escape. After stealing the property, Chen Jun called a taxi to a residential area in southern Shanghai that was densely populated with people from other provinces, a place where he could easily blend into the crowd and avoid detection. Throughout that night, he hid in an internet cafe, immersed in the virtual world, as if wanting to forget the crime he had just committed. The next morning, he dragged the suitcase full of stolen goods onto a bus and left Shanghai. On Friday after the tragedy, Diana's mother and stepfather arrived in Shanghai. With translation assistance from Canadian embassy staff, they met Diana for the last time. She lay peacefully among flowers, her body dressed in clean clothes, her face serene as if sleeping. However, when the mother saw her daughter's body, she couldn't hold back tears. Diana's entire body was covered with horrible knife wounds, especially deep wounds on her fingers. This image would haunt the grieving mother for the rest of her life. On November 17th, 2008, Shanghai number 1 Intermediate People's Court officially opened public trial for this shocking case. At court, Chen Jun had a different presentation compared to his initial confession to police. He insisted that he had no intention of harming Diana from the beginning. According to him, Diana had initiated by kicking his leg first, and that was why he stabbed the first knife as a self-defense reaction. Next, he said he wanted to flee but was blocked by Diana, forcing him to accidentally stab the second knife. When Diana screamed and ran outside, fearing neighbors would hear and discover, he chased after and, in a state of losing control, stabbed many times. Throughout the confession process, Chen Jun skillfully packaged each of his violent acts in justifications. She kicked me. She blocked my way. She was still struggling. I lost control. As if he was step by step removing his own active responsibility, leaving only the image of a reluctant perpetrator. The defense lawyer focused on 2 points to request reduced punishment. First, the client was only 18 years old, too young to receive the heaviest punishment. Second, after first leaving the scene, he called police, which proved he still had conscience and intended to help the victim. The lawyer hoped the court would consider this factor for leniency. However, the prosecutor strongly refuted these arguments. They pointed out that when reporting to police, Chen Jun didn't provide an accurate address, making it impossible for law enforcement to find the scene and turning the rescue meaningless. More importantly, he later returned to the scene a second time, not to help Diana but to ransack and steal property. He had seen Diana lying in a pool of blood but had no helping actions whatsoever. The prosecutor asked sharply, "What kind of rescue is this?" In a final effort, the defense tried to propose conducting psychiatric evaluation for Chen Jun, hoping to find evidence of psychological disorders that could reduce criminal responsibility. However, this request was immediately rejected by the court for lack of reasonable grounds. Chen Jun had shown complete sobriety throughout the crime process and afterward. The prosecution in the indictment clearly stated, defendant Chen Jun, with the purpose of illegally appropriating property, used violent means to rob property and cause death. According to China's criminal law, this act constitutes robbery under particularly serious circumstances and may warrant the death penalty. After 2 hours of trial, Chen Jun pleaded guilty in court, and the court announced it would choose a day to pronounce the sentence. At this point, Chen Jun was almost certain to receive the death penalty. However, the judicial system had a humanitarian feature. The victim's family opinion could influence the final decision. Therefore, the judge privately asked Diana's mother and stepfather about the sentence they desired: death penalty, life imprisonment, or under 25 years fixed-term imprisonment. This question stunned Diana's family. They didn't come here for revenge, but to understand why their daughter was massacred by a complete stranger with 22 stab wounds. After a moment of silence, they made a surprising decision: to request a suspended death sentence, a choice many people couldn't understand. When asked by an American reporter about the reason, Diana's mother explained that their family opposed the death penalty in principle, believing people could change. Death wasn't the end point of justice. Leaving a ray of hope was both restraint and faith. Second, she had noticed Chen Jun's family, poor farmers from the countryside, standing confused in the courtroom, not even knowing what to say to foreigners. This contrast touched her compassion. However, Diana's mother also frankly shared that Chen Jun's cold attitude in court toward Diana's death made her feel he didn't seem like a perpetrator but like an outsider. This made her realize Chen Jun was both a villain and a victim of the times. Finally, she said the most painful words: "We lost our child, but we don't want someone else's child to be killed too." A few months later, Shanghai No. 1 Intermediate People's Court delivered the final verdict. Chen Jun was sentenced to death with 2 years suspension. The story of Diana and Chen Jun became a warning message about social contradictions in the era of globalization. Two young people from completely different worlds, but fate brought them to a fateful encounter behind a door that wasn't properly closed. Diana, with pure beauty and bright future, became a victim of a society where the gap between rich and poor, the loneliness of migrant workers, and survival pressure could turn humans into monsters. Chen Jun had to bear the appropriate sentence for the crime he committed, but the questions this case raised remain. If society were less cruel and people less cold, could this tragedy have been avoided? What do you think about this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for following, and see you in the next videos.